like this happens. And around the same time, our other brother, I remember standing in his front entry, and he introduces to me the concept of Mary as the Ark of the Covenant. and my wife and I were standing there, and it was one of those conversations, the conversations where you're like, you were ready to leave, but you don't leave. It was one of those. And I was just like, really? Because he had just well, not just necessarily, but he had discovered typology in a big way.
Yeah, and he was teaching catechism, so that's grade 11 and 12 high school students at the Reformed Church he belonged to, but he's using Scott Hahn.
Oh. Yeah, and this had come up for him.
And of the three of us, he was the one who became Catholic first.
Yes. Because he had gotten in a fight with a Jehovah's Witness, if memory serves, where he was trying to talk to the Jehovah's Witness and be like, the Jehovah's Witness was like, well, it's all corrupt. And he's trying to get back as far as possible to say, well, how far back can I get?
Well, it wasn't even a matter of that. It was, he would send me the transcripts of the emails between this argument, and I was supposed to offer, because I had the official graduate degree. Of course. I was supposed to be the one to kind of be the theological
heavyweight
referee, heavyweight, tell him, yes, you're right, the Jehovah's Witness is wrong. But I remember telling him to him one email, because I was getting really frustrated reading these long diatribes. I'm like, who has this time to write out these novels on email? And I said, you're both arguing like Protestants. And what's going to happen is you're just going to be in circles. I said, the only way to step outside that kind of vicious Protestant circle is to actually go to the early church fathers.
When we talk about really good conversion stories, guys, these are the kind of things we're talking about. This is one of those examples of iron sharpening iron this week on the show. Three brothers, two of them here today, who became Catholic. Guys who rigorously discussed theology, who argued and debated and dug deeply into theology, raised in the Reformed Calvinist tradition, who became Catholic, one after the other, as iron sharpens iron. The last of all, the Anglican priest of the three, who left his pastorate, left his church, left the priesthood to become Catholic. That's how committed he was. He is, you'll hear the story, to becoming Catholic. Guys, it's an amazing story of guys digging deeply, and I love these stories. Three brothers who became Catholic. Guys, you're going to love this. Please watch and enjoy. Okay, here we go, guys. Welcome back to the show. I'm thrilled to bring you some brothers, guys. These are amazing conversations. I love when the whole family gets involved in these kind of conversion stories. This is a lot of fun. I'm joined this week by Adom and Jason Postma. They're going to introduce themselves so you guys on the podcast can hear their voices, and we'll get into this amazing journey. So I don't know, younger or
I defer to the eldest brother. I mean, we're not religious brothers, so there is still a hierarchy here.
Say what you want about the millennials, they can still, I guess, show deference to their older, wiser.
It's rare.
I'm older and I still have a little bit more hair than Adam. Not a lot, but so we'll go with that.
You can't tell.
He wore the hat.
He wore the hat. Yeah, so that's clever on that part. Yeah,
Jason. Okay.
Truly a family affair, but as you'll hear, our stories, as much as we grew up together, our religious stories diverted for a while and came back. But I'm Jason. I'm married to Natalie. We've been married now for 21 years. We met at university when we were students at St. Jerome's University in Waterloo.
Yes.
Why a good Calvinist boy was attending a Catholic institution of higher education is beyond me.
His younger brother was very confused too.
I think I was trying to be a good Protestant and rebel against the rebellion of my parents, even though I don't know, that seemed to be the cool thing to do at the time. The pressure, of course, was to go to a Calvinist school, preferably Redeemer or Calvin, great schools in their own right. But I said, no, I am going to go to a secular university, University of Waterloo, and I'm going to live in residence at the Catholic University, because this is what true academia is about. It's about rebellion. And so, Mom and Dad, thanks, but I can go my own way. Anyway, that's where I met Natalie, and been married now for 21 years. We have 4 kids. ranging in ages from 15 to 10. And so that's a real journey, especially since most recently I've been hired on to be the school chaplain at St. Francis Xavier in the Halton Catholic District School Board. And so work and home are a bit of an overlap because spending all day working with teenagers at school and then coming home and having a couple high school teenagers is a bit of a challenge. But what's interesting about that is I can use my two eldest children as kind of a litmus test or a laboratory for, hey, is the old man being hip or being dumb if I say or do this? And usually the answer is you're being dumb, but occasionally they're like, oh, okay, yeah. So if there's a bit of a pause before telling me I'm, completely lame and out of touch, I take that as a good thing.
Yeah, you're gaining aura, Jason. You're gaining aura.
Yeah. So that's it takes a lot of street cred, and you got to build this. And I guess that's the main stuff to know about me.
Amazing.
And, over to the younger.
I am the, what is it? 8 years the younger.
8 years.
8 years the younger brother. There's two siblings between us, but 8 years the younger brother. I am married to my wife, Nicole. Been married for, 14 years. I did not do the same thing as Jason and rebel against the parents. I was the opposite, because that Redeemer he mentioned, I went to which I don't have anything bad to say about the Redeemer as a school. I don't. I went through. We did my thing. I knew what I wanted to do professionally the whole time. Whatever. I've been doing that for a number of years now. Been an accountant, which will play into things. Interestingly enough, how does the accountant play into conversion story? But it does. And as anyone who's not on the podcast can't see this, but behind me I have a whole bunch of guitars, because that was a very important thing to me as well. In my upbringing, was music and was playing in church. So, yeah.
And how many kids do you have?
Oh,
have you forgotten about them? Okay.
4. So what?
I have a number of nephews and nieces, 4 of which belong to Adam. So.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, you describe all that for me.
Well, it's interesting because Adam's story in some ways is the reverse of mine. He was the good son who did everything he was supposed to. I rebelled against what I was expected to do when it comes to education. I had lots of formal music education. Adam had none, and he's the better musician.
Take that.
So I'm the guinea pig, and by the time mom and dad got to Adam, they had it figured out. This is how you do it. So
that's the classic firstborn situation, isn't it? So
yeah. You're the beta version.
I am the martyr and the sacrificial lamb. We'll take that.
That's amazing, guys. You have an amazing story, and I've heard bits and pieces over the last number of years. I mean, Adam, we met and struck up a friendship, and we've talked on and off since then. So I've heard bits and pieces of your conversion story and how it connects to your brothers. We heard actually a different guest on this show who her conversion story ties into the missing brothers conversion story, which was amazing because she kind of met them as a couple of Catholic converts who she was like, oh, this is possible. I can do this thing because these guys did this, right? And so I mean, there's tons of connections here. I have never ever heard like the full sibling story, so I'm excited to hear this from you guys. So I don't know, I think the older brother will kick things off here, guys, but let's hop in a time machine.
Put some dates to it, Jason, so we know where we are.
The accountant wants some numbers.
Numbers, yes, yeah. That's the other thing. Adam's the number guy. I'm the word guy. So I've kind of my initial career began with words. Specifically, I was going to University of Waterloo, did a degree in liberal arts in preparation to go to law school, and had kind of a road to Emmaus, road to Damascus, on the road in the university experience where God spoke to me in a way that was completely shocking, unexpected. I didn't know what to do with it. As I'm entering into my final year at university, audibly in my head, God said, "You're going to do a Master of Divinity, and I'm calling you to ministry." I remember that thinking, I know exactly on campus where I was. Anyone who's familiar with University of Waterloo, was right by the Dana Porter Library.
Yes,
I
sir.
stopped in my tracks quite literally, and I was like, what just happened? Right? These sorts of things don't happen to good Calvinist boys. We do not have these kind of charismatic experiences. When we feel our hands start to lift, it's like, no, put it down, right? It's kind of like the jokes of, you ever hear the story about the Baptist in the liquor store? No, you didn't, and neither did they, right? So I remember being quite shocked by this because it was something completely foreign to my own religious and spiritual experience, having grown up in a very faithful, devout family. What's strange about the Postmas, I think, as a whole clan, we had a family reunion a month ago, and I think there's almost 100 Postmas from our grandparents. So with aunts and uncles, cousins, siblings, and their children. To a person, they're all still faithful Christians, which is completely bizarre. Not all within the kind of Reformed church that we grew up in, but still, nevertheless, all faithful Christians. So that's kind of a weird experience we had in our own story. But this experience I had at university of this audible voice was completely foreign to what we grew up with. And I didn't know what it meant because I had no idea what a Master of Divinity was. I'd never heard that term before. And that kind of affirmed to me that this wasn't something that I had made up, because this was completely foreign language to me. And so I talked to the campus minister, who was a Reformed campus minister, great guy, did a lot of, was a very good mentor for me, especially in those formative undergrad years. And I said, I had this experience. I need you to help me unpack what this means. And unfortunately, he kind of, well, fortunately for, in the grand scheme of things, but unfortunately for me, he said, yes, this is a legitimate experience. And I mean, unfortunate in the sense because it was so jarring to me and being so completely foreign to the way that I had lived out my faith, which is a very intellectual, very doctrinaire, academic kind of faith. And he said, no, this is a real thing. And so, first of all, that disarmed me and made me had to step back and say, so it's possible that, people that are, part of the broad evangelical spectrum of Christianity, they're not always as crazy as I like to think they are. And he's like, no. I'm like, okay, well, that's a learning for me right there. And then the experience of, okay, Master of Divinity, what is that? And learning that that's kind of the standard degree that you have to go into ministry in a church. So as a young 22-year-old, that scared me, because I thought, well, who am I at 22 years old to even want to consider the possibility of leading a church? Now, that's not entirely built on humility. I want to make that very clear. A lot of that was based on I had a really strong anti-clerical bent. Like a lot of undergrads, a lot of kind of people that prided themselves intellectually, I had no use for clergy and for organized religion in that sense of the word. And so I was like, no, this is not me, right? I'm argumentative. That's why I want to be a lawyer. I'm the guy who graduated high school and won the award among my classmates for being that I would be the world's most famous lawyer because I would have everyone in tears because I would never, ever back down from an argument. I would always make sure I won. So here I am arguing with the campus minister, arguing with God. No, this is nonsense. There's no way this is going to happen. So it was affirmed by the campus minister, no, I think you actually might have the gifts for ministry as a whole. And the only way you're going to know that is to actually go into theological education and to pursue that. So as a good Calvinist boy, the institution that would that forms the ministers is Calvin Seminary. And so that kind of scared me a little bit because, well, I'm a good Canadian. I don't need to go to the States, And again, I'm not very patriotic. This is kind of me arguing my way out of a position, thinking, no, Canadians don't need to go to Grand Rapids. There's got to be good theological education here. And so I thought, again, being 22 years old, there's no way that I'm going to be ever ready for this. And I don't like clergy, and I don't want to be the kind of person that I just don't like. Anyway, fast forward, I applied to a Master of Divinity program at Regent College in Vancouver, was accepted, and went, uh-oh, what do I do now? So thankfully at this point, I'm engaged to my now wife, Natalie, and she had always had a childhood dream of teaching overseas, specifically in Japan. And so we got married, and I deferred my enrollment so that we could go to Japan. I thought, perfect,
Yeah.
right? So insert jokes about Jonah and whoever else you want about running away from that sort of thing. You can only run from God for so long. And after 2 years in Japan, we moved back to southwestern Ontario, and Natalie began her studies Teachers College in Windsor, and I worked for the family business, doing sheet metal, air conditioning, tin banging, and running pipe, laying pipe. Anyway, trying to discern, okay, what am I going to do? I still have this sense of God is calling me to formal ministry. What am I going to do? Well, at this point, sorry, I forgot to add a piece of this. I had already, after university undergrad, I applied to, in addition to Regent College, I applied to a master's program at the Institute for Christian Studies, which is part of the University of Toronto. It was affiliated with, or still is affiliated with, the tradition that Adam and I grew up with, the Christian Reformed Church. And so I thought, oh, this is a great way to kind of split the difference. It's still a master's degree, it's still theology, but it's not necessarily directed toward parish congregational ministry. Maybe I can do the kind of work that my mentor in my undergrad years offered, campus ministry. Maybe that's what I can do. And so I kind of hedged my bets. So anyway, upon returning to Japan with this graduate degree in tow, I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do? God is still saying, yep, that's nice. You've done your thing. I'm still waiting for you to fulfill what I'm asking you to do. So being kind of Don Draper in my own mind, right? If you know Mad Men, Don Draper does not sign a contract. He comes and leaves on his own terms. When he wants to go and take a business or to leave, he will do it on his own terms. I thought, well, maybe I won't pursue ordained ministry. Maybe what I can do is kind of ministry adjacent. So working in a church setting, but not necessarily being beholden to the man or beholden to the system or whatever it was. And that way, if I wanted to leave, I can leave whenever I want, right? It's just a matter of, because if I'm not ordained, I'm not part of that, the system. So I took a position in youth ministry in a rural town here in southwestern Ontario, and did that for about a year and a half. Got headhunted to another church just north of Toronto, doing kind of a similar position in youth ministry, but again, a non-ordained position. Was there for a couple years. Got headhunted again to another Reformed church in rural southwestern Ontario, and then realized, wait a minute, I don't know that I'm actually still Reformed. So kind of had a theological crisis. And what drove that was, in our tradition, in the CRC, you have to sign what's called the oaths of subscription or forms of subscription. I can't remember the actual nomenclature, but it's basically you have to say that you uphold the Heidelberg Catechism, the Belgic Confession, and the Canons of Dort. And I remember thinking, well, I'd never had to do that in my previous positions, but now they're asking me to do this, and I actually don't know that I can.
Yeah.
So am I actually still a Calvinist? And I felt I owed it to my family, my grandparents in particular, who were immigrants to Canada after World War II, like a lot of other Dutch people. They came here with nothing. They built schools. They built organizations and institutions. And I thought, who am I to actually turn my back? So that kind of rebellious streak kind of came to an end when I'm like, uh-oh, what do I do with this?
That actually requires something of me.
It actually requires something of me. I have to stop and think, because, it'd been nice kind of just coasting along. These institutions kind of brought me through all this, going to Christian day school and, being faithful Sunday worshipers at our local congregation and things like that. And it's like, now, but do I actually believe this? Not just in the general mere Christianity sense, but like in the very clear doctrinal statements of that tradition. And I was like, I don't. And if I don't, what does that mean for the career I've just started to build for myself? Because I can't continue in the Reformed tradition this way. Now, that's not to say at this point that I was, looking elsewhere. I was still very Protestant in my thinking, and at that point. And so I announced that at the last Sunday at the church we were serving in, that I was taking a position at that next church that I had been headhunted to. And in a move of divine providence, after the service, I had 6 people come up to me individually, and they told me, don't take that position. That position will not be good for you. It will not be good for your family. And I thought, well, that's quite something that these people, without talking to each other, having just heard this, that I had announced that I was stepping down, all come to me and say the same thing. There's something there. It's scary again, because it's asking me to do something I don't know what happens next. And it happened to be that was the day that my eldest son was celebrating his first birthday in August. You were Adam and his family.
I remember being in the backyard.
Yeah. And so everyone leaves, but our mom and dad were hanging around. And they said, after everyone had left, they said, listen, Jason, we think it's a bad idea for you to take that position. We think it's bad for you. We think it's bad for your family. We think you need to go to seminary. And I'm like, that's great, because that's what everyone else has told me. And again, in this image I have in my mind that I'm the independent man, that I belong to no system and I belong to no organization, everyone's telling me, and my parents being the kind of final voice to say, you need to go to seminary. And they very graciously said, listen, we will help you and to do what you need to do to make that transition. But the thing is, it's August 26th, and the school term starts in a week and a half. I have no applications in. I mean, up to this point, I have told the church that had headhunted me, I'm going to work for you, and we will be moving shortly, and we will be coming to you. So I'm like, well, what do I do? And I realized that from my time in my first graduate degree at the U of T, I had a lot of connections to people at Wycliffe College, Anglican institution at University of Toronto, and Anglican in the Evangelical tradition. So at U of T, there's Trinity College, Hogwarts as we called it, right across the road from Wycliffe. And Wycliffe and Trinity stare each other down. And if you know anything about the history of that institution, in some cases, it often came to near blows, if not to blows, because you had the high Anglo-Catholic liberal theological tradition of Trinity and the low church conservative evangelicalism of Wycliffe College. And I'm like, I have a lot of connections at Wycliffe. So, all right, if this is God's plan for me, I will just apply to Wycliffe, a week and a half with school to go, and we'll see what happens. 2 days later, I had an interview with the principal of the school. And he said, yeah, you're good to go, but your graduate degree from your previous time at U of T is good to go. We'll recognize some of your credits. You start in a week. And so when God removes all possible roadblocks, you kind of have no excuses. And me being the argumentative one, I'm like, all right, you win, God. I have no arguments left. Here we go. And so entered seminary, did 3 years of study at Wycliffe. It was a very formative time for me. Wycliffe theologically is a very good school, prides itself with not just its academic work, but the real formative work that they do in preparing people for parish and congregational ministry. One of the things that Wycliffe is also very good at doing is making Anglicans. So probably about half of the student body when I went in was in my class were not Anglicans, half were, but that number dropped probably to 25% not being Anglican and 75% being Anglican by the time you graduate, because you are immersed in a tradition of, like I said, low church evangelicalism that is very comfortable to someone like me coming from a Calvinist Reformed low church tradition, but also had elements of the more quote unquote formal liturgical elements that there was something beautiful about them, something mysterious about them, something powerful about them that was very attractive. And so going into Wycliffe with no intent of becoming Anglican and then graduating Wycliffe as an Anglican was a deeply formative experience for me. And I was like, okay, well, you dummy, you should have just listened to God earlier and done this before, and you would have been a lot more settled in your career. And then you wouldn't have had to do that Jonah running around and all that silly stuff. Now, of course, looking back, I can see, God in his wisdom allows us to run around and do that sort of stuff because it's still formative for us, in the way that's sometimes deformative to work out some of that other stuff so that you become a more fertile tilling ground. And then began a career as an Anglican priest, and assuming that that was going to be my life story. Here I am. God has called me to ministry.
This is when I got to see, like, that's when you got to be a deacon or whatever, right? And we got to see some of the, yeah. And this, so I'm just jumping in because this is all new to me at this point in time, right? At this point, I'm like, what's a deacon? Because in our tradition, it was like, no, a deacon's the person who collects the collection. Like, what in the world is a deacon? And it was like, Jason's like, yeah, we do Lord's Supper every week, and I'm just like, Lord's Supper what? I don't understand this because we had gone to Anglican church in Rondo Provincial Park growing up because that was the choice. You either go to the Catholic church, you go to the Anglican church. So we went to the Anglican church.
And the choice was even so. As good Sabbatarian Calvinists, Rondo Provincial Park has two churches inside the park itself: an Anglican church, as Adam said, and a Catholic church, a Roman Catholic church. And so the choice for my parents was, well, driving into town again to go to our Sunday church when we're on vacation, no, let's not do that, because the campground, the churches are right by the campground. But the problem was the Anglican church had a quote unquote lady minister.
Yes. See, I was not old enough for this, but Jason knows.
I remember this very well. That phrase from our mother was burned into my mind. And so we went to the Anglican church because, well, a Protestant lady minister is better than a Roman Catholic church.
Wow, yeah.
Because Roman Catholics are idolatrous, all the standard, they worship Mary, they worship the saints.
For the record, like, we're not, nothing against our parents.
I don't think we would be even Catholic, let alone Christian, if it wasn't for the faithfulness of our parents. I have to make that, as Adam said, very, very clear. Where we are today is because of who our parents shaped us to be.
Yes. And how
I don't think
the faith. They made the faith very important.
Yeah. Now, I don't think they're necessarily super ecstatic that their sons have become Catholic, but they're supportive in the way that they can be as Protestants. So in my reception to the Catholic Church this year, my parents were there. I didn't ask them to be there. I didn't expect them to be there. I said, listen, this is happening on this day. And they came. Mm-hmm. And so that's to their credit. So this is not parent bashing. All credit to mom and dad for that.
Yeah.
But going back to Rondo, and I remember the experience. My mom had to sit us down when we went back to the campsite after Sunday liturgy at the Anglican church, which I love because it was short. The homilies were 5 minutes. You got to stand, you got to sit, you got to kneel. It was colorful. The lady minister was wearing, what we now know as vestments, but she was wearing colorful robes and things like that. And she said, listen, this is not how we do things. We go here because we're Christian and this is a Christian church. And so we go there, but that's not how we do things, because they write out their prayers, and written prayers are not from the heart. We pray from the heart. Their sermons are too short. They don't really count. So, the length of a sermon is indicative of your level of piety and doctrinal seriousness. Yeah. And the church is too ornate. There's too much going on, right? That leads you down the slippery slope to idolatry. So my parents always framed it as a learning experience. You can learn from this, but just realize this is not how we do things.
So, right? So like Jason remembers all this, and I don't remember this. So I remember having gone there, but my first exposure is when Jason enters into the Anglican church.
Yes,
which we said was 2012.
No, so I was ordained a deacon in 2015 on St.
Yes.
Andrew's Day, November 3rd.
This is kind of good time. So I'm actually going to take us back a couple of years to go to mine. As we alluded to, Jason was whatever. It's just Jason is the rebel. He was being a rebel. Fine. I was not be. When I write my conversion story, I start with my conversion story of my goal was ease. By nature, I do not like conflict. I hate conflict by nature. So my goal, like through all growing up, was just don't have any conflict. Do the things. Sounds great. I did I was involved in music at church. And I still remember my uncle was fantastic. He was so supportive. He played the drums and he's like, yeah, we should get you up there and here. And like, I'm sure it was awful. And he's like, here, you can do this. And I probably showed up with an acoustic guitar and a little electric amp and like, what in the world is that? Like, but he was very and so immensely supportive, very loving. And that was, important to me. And I did the whole youth service thing where I was involved in that and in the sense of, okay, we're going to do worship for that. And
Did you play at the first sermon I ever gave, which was the youth service?
Might have. With that other guy, the one guy who you put us together with that we all played together. I think so.
Oh man. Yeah. I remember that sermon now. Oh my goodness, that just came back to me.
Yeah. So and that was what I was focused on, and questions were not really something worth asking. When I was in grade 11, I found accounting and was like, this is it. This is my life. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I went to Redeemer because I was like, you know what? I heard about the experience of my cousin going to Laurier and she didn't like it. She ended up at Redeemer. I was like, oh, forget that. Then I'll just go to Redeemer, the school anyway. I
saw the mistakes my brother made. I'm not going to repeat them.
I still remember that first day at St. Jerome's and it was the mass. And I was just like, what is going on? What is this? I don't understand. So
I don't understand either. But for me, this is being regressive. This is being regressive. Look at how rebellious I am.
Yeah. But yeah, go to university and, do all the courses. And it was very streamlined. It's like, yep, I know exactly what I got to do because like basically when you do accounting, there's a certain amount of course credits and you don't really get all leeway. You just do those courses. Great. That's what I want. Very focused in that. Met my wonderful wife there. Okay. We did the classic thing that I have no hesitation about, met there, got married shortly after, whatever. And then
the old MRS degree.
Yeah. But the other thing I think that's a bit unfair about that is that it's the MRS degree, but like there could be a flip side. And like she works, she got a degree, she's a teacher. It's not just an MRS degree here. So, but yeah. I love you, hon. Where things kind of get interesting is, okay, so now after that was all given. Right. My life up until that point in time was like, yes, there's a direction. This is what you do. I still had a lot of direction in the sense that like, in order to get your letters as an accountant, you need to go through certain, professional certifications, stuff like that. I had a bit of uncertainty finding a job, whatever. I ended up finding one shortly after school. So that wasn't a problem. And we get married and we move to a city that is basically 2 hours from each of our parents. Like we're in the middle. We're far from either parents. And so that's the first, when you're in university, it doesn't feel the same way because you're amongst a whole bunch of your peers. You're having a great time. Oh, fantastic. Awesome. You're like, I still remember in like second year or something like, yeah, we're going to live like this forever. We're going to buy a whole townhouse community and we're all going to live together. Right. And then, yeah, naivety. I know. But just whoever's in university or college, just love your time there. It is what it is. Love it. It's fantastic. Your dorm room as a male will be absolutely filthy. Guess what? That's fine. You'll move on. But then you move on to marriage and it's like, okay, I'm in this new town. What do I do? Well, we were both CRC and it was just a given. Like, why would it be anything different? We're going to go to the CRC church down the road. And it makes a lot of sense still to me today. Why wouldn't you do that? That like, it's the faith tradition you were raised in. That it is much better than just being like, oh, we can't decide, so we'll never go. Right? Like that could be an option as well. It's just like, oh, I can't figure it out. Church shopping, I will say it's a church hopping, whatever you want to call it. That was never really a thing for us. I don't know if I think about it, my only ever exposure was once to the Pentecostal church in town when growing up. You know which one I'm talking about, Jason, down on Highway 3. And then once to, what's the Alliance Church again? I can't remember.
So To go into this part, yeah. So there was actually a time in our formative years, and Adam may not remember this. I don't remember how old you are. You probably were too young
I
to
was
remember
8 years
this.
younger than you, so you can do the math.
Yeah. So at that point, in terms of
Okay.
ecclesial or spiritual formation, there was a falling out with my parents and my mom's family. And I'm not going to get into the details of all this, but growing up in a very small rural community in a very ethnocentric congregation, you knew everyone and you were probably related to about half of them. And in a small rural community, if there's beef in the family, it becomes really, really difficult. And so my parents, for a period of about 2 years, we were ecclesial nomads. Now, of course, we never set foot in a Catholic church, but we went to every branch of Protestant church that you could imagine.
There, because
Our brother, beep, he could list off all the different denominations that we went to. In fact, we had a little routine that we would do. He and I would go to a different church. By that point, we both had our licenses, and we would go, and then we would go get a cheeseburger from McDonald's, and then we would debrief the service and our experience of it on the drive home. So we had quite a rich, maybe rich is a bit of an overstatement. We had a lot of exposure to the wide swath of Protestantism. So Adam was not into church shopping. Our middle brother and I definitely were, and that was something I continued actually in my undergrad years. In my first round of grad school, went to different communities all the time, almost like a sociological experience, just so I could sit back and kind of watch these people and make mental notes, and in my worst excesses, just critique everything I could, almost as a way to deconstruct the faith and laugh at people for their excesses and their idiosyncrasies. Again, not a very good look, not a very humble way to approach these things. But I always looked at, well, at least I'm being open and I'm going to these places and trying to, experience their way of being Christian.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a given for us, right? We would go to the CRC church that was closest to us. I'm sure the people were great, and it was really just us being new and not knowing how to handle this. We never end up feeling moored there. But we weren't really planning on staying where we were living anyway. First year being married, we were like, where are we going to live? I rented an apartment, sight unseen. I was like, my wife was very gracious, being like, okay, great. Like, she'd never seen the apartment. Like, she was so gracious about it. But then we knew pretty quickly that we wanted to move. So we actually ended up moving. At that point in time, I think I was driving an hour to work. And so we wanted to move closer to my work because we were like, this can't work long term, we don't think. So yeah, we moved. And in the following year, again, I did do not quite church shopping per se, but like there were 2 CRC congregations relatively-ish close to where we were. And I think we went to the one once. And what I liked about it, I was like, oh, Jason, I remember, knew about this. And he's like, yeah, they have a service Sunday. I was like, oh, really? That's interesting. A service Sunday. That sounds like real lived out Christianity. I like the sound of that. I don't remember really why we per se didn't go. My guess is that it didn't feel comfortable to either of us coming from where we came from. So we landed in the one that was just closer to us, larger. Anyway, we still have our sense of unmooring a little bit, but they said, hey, come to the new members class. The new members class, we just, you're CRC, but we just think it'd be good, to help ingratiate you into the church and to, make sure that you know what it's all about. We're like, okay, we're newly married still. And we're like, okay, let's do this then. Let's go together. I will, this burns into my brain. We are in this class and we are talking about various things. And we get to the point where we're talking about the Bible. I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. All right, cool. Like, why is the Bible the Bible? Okay. So that's the Bible. And I don't remember exactly how he explained it up until that point. So apologies to anyone who's looking for that. But I was just like, wait, so what if I wrote a book? Could I put the book in the Bible? What prevents me from putting the book in the Bible? And I don't remember his answer explicitly, other than just being like so disappointed in the answer. Being like, oh, so you don't have a reason why we can't just put more books in it. I was like, oh. But again, like I just kind of brushed it off. Because I was like, okay, whatever. All right, right? Like now it was
Don't want to rock the boat, don't want to ask
100%.
questions. Stay the course, follow the script.
Yeah, let's just okay. All right, that's kind of weird. Huh. All right, let's keep going. In some ways,
Coming from the guy who, you know, improvises musically and can do all that, but everything else, you know, by the book.
Because like we just viewed it as like, I think I almost viewed it as like, okay, this is just this thing we have to check off the box so we can be part of the church. All right, let's get through this. You know, went to get plugged into music because that was the natural way. Ended up, you know, we made some friends there who we're still friends with, and you know, we love them all dearly. And you know, some of them actually were even back from Redeemer, and so that was nice to get plugged in, and absolutely loved it there. Jason, my story is going to continue at about 2016 or 2017. I don't know if you have anything that you want to stick in between.
Yeah, no, we can go back to the ordination of the diaconate. I think in some ways was formative for Adom, as you mentioned, formative for me because it was a culmination of my studies. And here we go. Now I am signifying that I am ready to be part of an organization in a very formal way. And so the ordination liturgy for that was put together by the canon precentor at the cathedral at that point. And he asked the ordinands, he said, what do you want this service to be like in terms of feel? And we all said, high church. Because the old adage of one of my seminary professors was, the lower you are, the higher you fall. And so we had, me and the ordination class, for lack of a better word, we had all come into the church. I think we were all converts or reverts to Anglicanism from a low church setting. And we really were mystified and captivated by the beauty of the liturgy. And so inviting my family to this, knowing that this is going to be a liturgy with all the smells and bells. I don't know when the thurible had last been used at the cathedral, but they brought it out. It was full stop. They had that organ honking as loud as I think it's ever, you know, it was shaking the floors. The incense was going. And it was meant to showcase for the people being ordained the richness of Anglican liturgy. And to my mind, to this day, it's still a very memorable service for all the right reasons for what it was trying to do. And I remember I had invited a significant number of my very low church Calvinist family there. And God bless them, being very supportive, they showed up. A conversation after was, you know, insert, you know, Dutch accent. Wow, what was that now? Right? Like trying to wrap their heads around this full-bodied, immersive experience of the ordination to the diaconate and to the priesthood of those who are being ordained to the priesthood of that. But I remember my grandmother saying to me, though, she didn't really have the words to put it because she'd never experienced anything like this, at least not in the flesh. She said, no, that was nice, right? And for her, that was actually kind of high praise because it was something so foreign and so different to her. To say it was nice was to say, there's something to this. Okay, I think I'm okay with what you're doing. It looks Catholic, it sounds Catholic, but it assure me it's not Catholic, so I'm okay with it, is what it came down to. Mm-hmm. And then I reflected on my own, you know, reasons for becoming Anglican, and a lot of it was because it was a way to kind of be Catholic with all the dress and all the actions and all the sounds, but still remaining Protestant. And that's not unique to me. And I have friends and colleagues that will admit that. That's really what it comes down to for a lot of it, is you can be Protestant, but you can have all the externals of being Catholic, right? And that might be the strength of Anglicanism in a lot of ways. And I'm not going to, you know, it's still a very rich liturgical tradition. I think now what I would say is that the only way that Anglicanism in Canada at least is going to continue or survive is actually within the ordinariate, but that's a discussion for another day. But it was something formative because I remember our brother coming to me too after, and this was the second Anglican service he had been to. He had joined me once and my wife when we were doing our ecclesial sojourn in my first round of grad school at a Palm Sunday liturgy. And I remember after the service, he was absolutely horrified and he was mad at me for ever bringing him to that. Because the Palm Sunday liturgy in an Anglican church is very similar to what you see in a Catholic liturgy. A lot of processions, waving of palm branches, the asperges and all that. He was mad at me. Don't ever take me to something like that again. And don't ever tell me that that's a Christian worship service. That is just pageantry. That's just idolatry. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, that was a very visceral reaction. But after my ordination service to the diaconate, he had a bit of a different perspective. I think at that point, he was going through his own journey. And he was more open at that point to seeing the riches of the liturgy broadly put. That, okay, there's something powerful here that speaks to a deep yearning that as Calvinists, we've kind of learned to repress. We're the frozen chosen. And if you know anything about Dutch people, we tend to be very particularly frozen. And if you know anything about Frisians, which is a subsect within Dutch people, we are really, really stubborn. So these admissions that the liturgy was nice and that there's something to it, I think was an affirmation for me to say, okay, there's something to this. Okay, it is speaking to me on more than just a kind of rebellious level, that there is an existential need that's being filled here that the liturgy is offering to us.
Yeah. And around this time, if I'm just to flip back, things are getting interesting for me because at this point in time, I was an elder, which, believe it or not, I always say I was not old enough to be an elder. But anyway, I don't know. You got to be careful because Timothy was a priest or whatever. But like, yeah, I did not feel it. But I was on this concept called consistory. They had split up our elders between administrative elders and pastoral elders. And I had been elected an elder, and they were having their most recent fight about women in office. When I say most recent, I mean that back, I don't know, Jason, was that like in late 90s that they kind of said, okay, we'll agree to disagree? I think that's kind of what it was.
Yeah, the official stance, I believe, is that support for women's ordination and not support for women's ordination are both biblical positions that the CRC can uphold.
Yes. So
it's still technically a live issue because it's a both and, which is really a neither nor.
The church I was in, they were kind of making a stance, and they were kind of saying, no, that's it. We're going to decide as a church to fall very particularly on women in office is yes, go. And I remember seeing it, and not that I hadn't seen it growing up, and just again, I wasn't of the age. I remember seeing it very like concretely where there was a guy who was like, all right, I'm going to have to resign then. I can't be on this. And I was like, this is a weird thing to watch. What does this mean? And then again, okay, well, I wasn't willing to stay because I didn't have any deep-seated per se. I was just like, okay, I mean, I could probably go along to get along here anyway. Like, does it really matter? I think things to me probably started to shake when it was 2017, which I don't know, Jason, if I'm skipping anything if I take 2017, but you can always come back. I went to Calvin College, which we mentioned earlier, for the worship conference, which was an experience in of itself. I don't remember the name of the hotel, but the only redeeming factor it had in it is that it has doors that locked. That was the redeeming factor for the hotel. I think we brought sleeping bags and deliberately slept in them because it was that special. But at this point in time, I was going with a good friend of mine who he was the worship coordinator, and it was like, oh, let's go together because like he was the worship coordinator, I was helping lead worship. All right, let's do this. But that had my first introduction into like, okay, this is interesting. Seeing it kind of from the inside and how things work. And all right, this is the college, and okay, there's all these people from different faith perspectives here. And Marty Hagen, which is either a good name or a bad name, depending on where you fall, was there. And that was my first introduction to him. I had never met him before. And And so it was very curious. But yeah, and then shortly after this, there is a large blow up at my work. Like basically the entire department gets wiped out, and I'm left in the rubble. And I'm like, what is this? And this is shaking to the core fundamentally, because again, my trajectory was still set. I was in a destination to a certain point, but this happens, and everything like this happens. And around the same time, our other brother, I remember standing in his front entry, and he introduces to me the concept of Mary as the Ark of the Covenant. And my wife and I were standing there, and it was one of those conversations, the conversations where you're like, you were ready to leave, but you don't leave. It was one of those. And I was just like, really? Because he had well, not just necessarily, but he had discovered typology in a big way.
Yeah, and he was teaching catechism, so that's grade 11 and 12 high school students at the Reformed church he belonged to, but he's using Scott Hahn.
Oh.
Yeah, and this had come up for him.
And of the three of us, he was the one who became Catholic first.
Yes. Because he had gotten in a fight with a Jehovah's Witness, if memory serves, where he was trying to talk to the Jehovah's Witness and be like, Jehovah's Witness was like, well, it's all corrupt. And he's trying to get back as far as possible to say, well, how far back can I get?
Well, it wasn't even a matter of that. It was, he would send me the transcripts of the emails between this argument, and I was supposed to offer, because I had the official graduate degree.
Of course.
I was supposed to be the one to kind of be the theological
heavyweight
referee, heavyweight, tell him, yes, you're right, the Jehovah's Witness is wrong. But I remember telling him to him one email, because I was getting really frustrated reading these long diatribes. I'm like, who has this time to write out these novels on email? And I said, you're both arguing like Protestants. And what's going to happen is you're just going to be in circles. I said, the only way to step outside that kind of vicious Protestant circle is to actually go to the early church fathers. And the reason I said that was because I had just discovered the early church fathers in my own seminary education at that point. Because as Reformed people, and I remember asking a pastor in our tradition once, I said, what happened before 1517? And his answer was, nothing you need to worry about.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. I said, but what about these people like Augustine, like Ambrose? And the answer I got was, read them how Calvin reads them. When he footnotes them in the Institutes, that's all you need to know. So while I'm in seminary, the St. Vladimir's Press has those great popular patristics. And I'm going into the bookstore at Wycliffe, and I'm scooping these things up like crazy, because I'm like, my goodness, I'm getting an education, but now I'm getting an education as well in a whole period of history I never knew existed, right? It's basically the period after Augustine to 1517 is literally the Dark Ages, and nothing happened. And I'm like, wait a minute, lots of stuff is happening, and lots of stuff is happening prior to Augustine. So I told our brother, you've got to go to the early church. If you're going to try to argue around your Jehovah's Witness friend, you need to step outside that kind of Protestant doctrinaire dogmatic mentality that you set up. Otherwise, you're just going to be going back and forth. And frankly, I'm tired of reading these emails all the time. And I don't want to even weigh in, because I don't even think that, well, I know the one position is wrong, but I'm not convinced that this Calvinist position that you're taking is right. I'm not convinced a largely Reformed tradition is even right, because I'm reading all these church fathers now too, and it's opening for me a whole new theological vista. And so I pointed them there. And so second to the Holy Spirit being the one who influenced his own conversion, I will take some secondary credit for saying, listen, if you want to beat this Jehovah's Witness in an argument, you've got to read the early church fathers. And he did. And as Newman says, to be deep in history, ... And sure enough.
Yeah. And so I remember just being absolutely frustrated with him. Like, just like, what are you talking? Like, not initially on the concept of typology and Mary. Like, I did not like it, Mary as the Ark of the Covenant, because as you know, as a Protestant, it's like not uncommon to be like, who's Mary? Like, who is Mary? Why is this a thing? I don't remember explicitly, but I remember one time going down into the basement of my house, and we were texting about it, and he's like, here. He's like, I'm not going to explain it to you. Go listen to, give him a big shout out to Catholic Answers. I was like, whatever. I don't know why. I ended up listening to it. I think I might have started listening. Like, I think like my wife was pregnant with our second, and maybe it's just like I had some more time on my hands in the evenings because she was going to bed early. I don't know. Yeah. And because I was so frustrated about, like, how would you give up the assurance of salvation? Like, why would you do that? Like, Catholics don't have assurance of salvation. I mean, now knowing better, I mean, argue like,
well, and if anything, as good Reformed Protestants, we were told not only are Catholics not assured of salvation, we can be assured that they're probably not saved.
Yes.
Yeah. And which I think you guys got a little stronger than I did on the anti-Catholicism side. Like, I think by the time I came around, I didn't bear it quite the same.
Yeah, it was pretty heavily.
Yeah.
It was never like super explicit.
Yeah, it was more just like there's an undercurrent.
But it was there. So the way that I remember, we had Jehovah's Witnesses that would come frequently knock on our door growing up. And then my mom would go. She had this large NIV study Bible with a quilted cover. I think she still has it. Legendary Bible. And she would go, and I remember her flipping open to Ephesians and standing in the door, with her finger pointing over and over and over again in this, but you are saved by faith, not through works, saved by grace. Can't remember the exact passage. I remember it was Ephesians. And then she would come back in and she'd say, those Jehovah's Witnesses, this is what they believe. It's just like the Catholics, right? So for me, that formation was anything outside of kind of mainstream Protestantism was anathema. Like, you just don't touch it. To the point where there was a carol sing, an ecumenical carol sing, in our small town that we grew up in that was being hosted at the Catholic Church. And that was the first time I remember ever stepping inside a Catholic church. And I remember being full of fear and anxiety. Like, what am I going to see? What is this experience going to be like? Is this okay? Well, it has to be, because it's an ecumenical service. But again, there was this kind of briefing beforehand. Just realize what you see in there is not real Christianity, right? That's the stuff that we were able to shed ourselves of. Statues and Mary and Jesus on the cross and all that stereotypical stuff. We don't have that. So again, look at it like a sociological experiment, and then be grateful for the fact that Calvin fought so that we wouldn't have to deal with this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, really reacting against my older brother, his younger brother, and this concept of all this stuff he's introducing, and just like, I couldn't believe it. The next one I'm going to give the shout out to, called the Communion, as being the thing I ended up on. Both the podcast with Dr. David Anders and the actual website.
Yeah.
I think there were many days where I was up until 2 a.m. reading the Call to Communion and their comment section, because they go back and forth a lot in the comment section.
Wild story about Call to Communion. Adam was trying to put me onto this, saying this is a great thing you should listen to. I was hesitant because I'm like, I don't know, man. I've seen how our one brother's gone. I kind of see the way you're tracking. I'm an Anglican priest.
I think I remember.
Yeah. So what happened was, out of the blue, I happened to be driving between pastoral visits. At 2:55, I turn it on the Sirius XM in our vehicle, Called to Communion. And honestly, this is what happened. We have a call from Adam, or an email from Adam in Kitchener. I'm like, no way. And sure enough,
I definitely
emailed them. They read the email. It was at the end of the show. It was a question about justification. It was not a long answer that Dr. Anders could get into. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what are the chances that I just tuned into this radio show?
I'll be honest, I'm not
at the very moment.
Heard the answer. I don't. You might have been.
No. I'll have to go back and listen to the podcast archive. But I remember texting him and saying, "Did you email this?" He's like, "Yep, that sounds like something I emailed." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness!"
Wow.
Yeah.
And I remember at that point, okay, while Adam says I should listen to it, I just heard him email a question. Okay, I'll give it a chance and listen to it. If only, again, as a sociological experiment for my own formation. And what
Hey guys, just a real quick word to say thank you for watching this video. Thanks for enjoying this channel. If you have not yet subscribed to our channel, please do subscribe, hit that bell, get notifications, like this video, leave some comments, guys. We'd love to have you on board so you can watch everything else we're doing on this great channel. If you want to support this show, guys, financially, those links are in the show notes too. It's not my full-time job, so your support of the show goes a long, long way to making this possible. Thanks for watching, and continue please to enjoy this great content.
And what I realized was, though, watching both of my younger brothers go through this process, this theological process of testing what they had learned and learning about the fullness and richness of Catholic theology. When I started, I think Chesterton talks about this, when I started defending the Catholic Church to my parishioners who had a very, very, again, stereotypical view of Catholicism, and I'm defending the Catholic Church to say, well, actually, that's not how Catholics would self-understand this. I knew that, I don't want to say I was in trouble, but I knew that something was happening, right? That it was more than...
This ties into your story. Isn't that what your wife did?
Well, but yeah, what had happened was that, okay, I'm listening to the stories of my brothers, and I want to do honor to what they've experienced and what they've shared with me, and seeing what they've gone through, seeing the truth of what they've experienced, and not just the truth, but the beauty and the goodness of it.
Yeah.
Okay, that deserves defending, if only on its own merits. But then as I found I'm defending and explaining these things, I'm like, uh-oh, I have skin in the game now,
Yeah.
right? Well, okay, but that's okay. I'm an Anglo-Catholic. Anglo-Catholics historically, right, we see almost eye to eye on so much of this thing that it's okay for me as an Anglican priest to be espousing, well, I wasn't even espousing it, but to be in a very appreciative relationship with Catholicism. One of my bishops at that point had encouraged priests, because she was on the International Anglican Roman Catholic Consultative Council, and she said, it's very important for us as Anglicans to be reading Catholic sources. I'm like, perfect, great. This is the reality my brothers are living in. It's very adjacent to my own sacramental liturgical understanding. So I'm okay with this. But then again, I find myself being pulled into the beauty of it, the goodness of it, the truth of it, but being again very resistant and very stubborn. You know, partly because, well, my career is to be an Anglican priest. This is what I'm called to, right? So I can appreciate this, but obviously I can't commit to it, but that's okay. That's good for my brothers. That's good for other people that have went this way, but I'm good where I am.
Yeah. So at this point in time, you know, I had actually been to Catholic Church a couple more times since St. Jerome's, because my wife's one side of her family was raised Catholic, and so we would go to her grandma's church for midnight mass. Oh, okay. We do the classic. We're not going to kneel. We're going to sit forward a little bit so those sitting behind us can, you know, and kneel and pray. But at this point in time, I had actually gotten to the point where it's like, I think I got to go, because I got to go and now see this like with the understanding that I have. Very foolishly, I don't remember this explicitly, but I in my notes I have that I apparently just told my wife one day, I'm going to go to mass, and then I walked out the door. Like, horrible decision. awful decision. Don't do this, anyone. My biggest recommendation is please share with your spouse as you get it. Try to share as early as possible. It won't necessarily go better. It won't necessarily go the same, but please try to share as early as possible. This was around 2017. I'm already starting to get hesitant about the Reformed tradition that we're in. And at this point in time, we have to get our son baptized. And I'm already at the point where I'm like, I don't know, because there was a woman pastor at the church at that point in time, and I was like, I don't know if I want you to baptize our kid. I think there was this son. It could have been the other son. Oh crap! I gotta watch what I say. but
it was anyway, son number one, if I remember.
I think so. It doesn't really matter not saying that sons aren't important, but it doesn't really matter which son it was.
One faith, one baptism.
Yeah. And and about this same time, I will always remember this. We were very focused on we were trying to focus on the kids going to university in the consistory. I was still a pastoral elder at this point in time. We're like, look, we got to focus on them. Okay, we're going to meet with them before they go off to university, just kind of see, how's it going? What are you planning? Blah, blah. And I remember being in the meeting with another pastoral elder, and she's like, "Oh yeah, it doesn't matter what church you go to, just as long as you go to church." And I was just like, "Oh, well, this is a very arresting statement to me now. I don't know if I can." Wasn't going to undermine her there in front of the kid, because that's probably not going to help at all. But it was like, this is a very interesting perspective to be sitting with as someone on this. Is like, if that's the perspective, I'm not sure what means anything. And about the same time, you know, I'm asking them, because Jason's Anglican. I'm like, well, I probably had a bit of the same thing. I was like, maybe I could get a little bit of Anglican style in there. We can get there. I was like, well, what about like, you know, weekly communion, guys? What if we did weekly communion? And they're like, that sounds really Catholic. That doesn't sound like a good idea. And so this is just me. I'm like, I don't know anymore. And this probably began my descent into, basically, I'm either going to be an agnostic or I'm going to be a Catholic, and I don't really have a choice otherwise. Like, I either don't know or it's Catholic. I would say I probably sat there for a while, because around this same time, you know, that's right around when COVID hit. Like, there's a big stretch of time there, I know, but like COVID hits, and it's just like, oh, well, what do you do with this overall? Because I think I had started going to RCIA shortly before COVID hit, just to see, okay, well, maybe this is something I'm going to do. I remember really liking the one deacon who came in. Is fantastic. And it was just interesting to me to meet the people that are there, because a bunch of them were like, well, I'm getting married, so I need to go to RCIA. It's like, oh, this is interesting. Right. Just a whole different experience from what I have. And God bless them. And I hope they are welcomed into the faith. And I hope they, you know, embrace the Lord and fully. But it's just such a different perspective. But then COVID hits, and it's just like, oh, okay, well, I don't know what that's going to do about it. But then this is when, you know, and I'm probably skipping some stuff, but that's fine. This is when we're at the park, as you can be in COVID, after they said, oh yes, it's okay to be at parks. Parks are not a problem. and we meet a neighbor. And I didn't meet the neighbor originally, but Nicole knows now what I'm going through. And she's like, hey, you should meet this guy. He's a Catholic. I was like, oh, okay. And not only is he a Catholic, but he works for as a lawyer for whatever, the courts, whatever. And so he's particularly, you know, within the similar vein. And just to say what I mean by that is, I'm a tax accountant, and when I'm a tax accountant, I spend a lot of time in legislation. So he spends a lot of time in legislation. So we approach it very similarly in some ways, the amount of faith. And he gives me my first real introduction to a rosary. And he's like, you want to go on a rosary walk with me? I was like, okay, that sounds like something we can do during this COVID time. That would be fine. And I'm still, you know, at this point in time, when I was going to RCA, I was like, I think I need to become Catholic, but I think I got to kind of go to RCA to really figure out if it's kind of like actually what it says it is. You know, who are the people here? We go on this rosary walk, and I will never forget this, is we are approaching the church. There's a path to the nearest church that was the nearest Catholic church that was nearest. And I smell incense out of nowhere as we were praying the rosary. And I'm like, hey, do you smell that? It's like, no, I don't smell that. It's like, really? You don't smell any incense? Like, none at all? Like, no. It's like, oh, well, this is something special. I don't know what to do with it, but this is something special, that I can smell incense and he can't smell it. You know, maybe one of my brain misfired. I don't know, but I'm thinking that it's something more than that. And so he then introduced me to, at the point in time we were going to, there was a special Eucharistic adoration. They could have up to 10 men. We would go to, he invited me to the church where Keith, you and I eventually met. Yeah, indeed. And to go to the Eucharistic adoration. I felt very, very lucky. I was not a Catholic, and I'm being invited as one of 10 men to Eucharistic adoration. And at this point in time, then I finally, you know, my wife, again, so gracious. She's like, okay, you have to do this. I guess you have to do this. And so I enrolled in RCIA. And I don't remember exactly when I was received into the church now, which feels weird, but in some ways, Easter 2022. That's what I thought it was. In some ways, once you're Catholic, the number of days doesn't matter. It's kind of why I don't remember that very particularly. It's like, I am now. Not that I've reached the end of the learning. I always think about C.S. Lewis's, and I think it's in The Last Battle. It's further up and further in. There's always a further up and further in.
Further up, further in.
Yeah. And then so then I got to join on the train with my other brother to start ragging Jason about, hey, why aren't you Catholic yet?
Yeah, so shout out to all the podcasts and stuff, but also to Adam and to our other brother, because we have a very lively group text.
Yes, I heard about this.
It's a bit legendary. I don't know if it's necessarily fit for public consumption sometimes. Not because there's anything inappropriate, but just because it's hard to explain
You have to know
the
who
outsiders.
you are.
You have to know who we are, the three of us, and a lifetime of growing up together. My kids get very defensive of their Uncle Adam because they think that his two older brothers are too hard on him sometimes. And that could be the case, but I have to give credit to both of my brothers for being persistent in pestering me, I guess you could say, and saying, when is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? And I never came in with the intent, like I said, that it would happen. I was an appreciative bystander as an Anglican. I was as close to being Catholic as you could. For me, I was embodying St. John Henry Newman's dictum that the Anglican Church is the halfway house between Catholicism and atheism. And I said, okay, if I can steer people away from atheism and they sit on the fence with me in the Anglican Church, great. If they become Catholic, I'm not going to stand in their way. That's fine too, just so long as they are not on the other side of the road heading down toward atheism. And so for me, the experience of being Anglican was a way of being Catholic adjacent. And so for my formation was as a Calvinist and as an Anglican. And so becoming Catholic actually was like a tiny step for me in a lot of ways because of all the work that had gone on before in my own personal formation and the stories of my brothers. And so when I was received on Trinity Sunday, which was also Father's Day this year, it seemed to be fitting, and they were there with me, and it was joyous, but it was also just another Sunday at Mass. And I was like, yeah, this is right. And to echo Adam's thing, yeah, like time kind of changes after the fact. I always thought the language of homecoming and all that was very trite and sentimental and romanticized. But once you're in, it's like, yeah, 100%. So as Catholics, I don't want us to lose that language of homecoming and returning home and coming home. To our Protestant separated brothers and sisters, just go with it and understand it, that it's because we love you, but it'll make sense when you when you join us. Because it truly is, it's a family thing. And like I said, like we had our own individual journeys that overlapped. We had our arguments and falling out and misunderstandings. The middle brother and I are very, very argumentative, very loud, very insistent on our own positions. And through all that, God's grace can still work and bring us to where we are. And for me, to echo something Adam said about the power of the rosary, again, I did it as an experiment. I think it was something that our brother said about the rosary, or listening to a talk. I think it was listening to a talk that Brant Petrie gave on I can't remember. It was one of his talks, but I was like, remember listening to it again when I was a pastor up in Grey and Bruce County. Spent a lot of time on the road between church visits and pastoral visits, and listening to one of the CDs he had given me. And I remember being moved to tears and feeling it was important for me to buy a rosary. Again, no idea how to do it. Knew what it was theoretically, had heard it, right? This is the kind of thing that old church ladies like to have, and it's not for real masculine kind of Christianity. But I remember pulling over to the side of the road, listening to this talk by Brant Petrie, tears coming out of my eyes, going on Amazon, just typing in rosary, bought the first one I had, and then sitting in I was at a 4-point parish, sitting in one of the churches with an app on my phone showing me how to do this, praying the rosary, and actually having, again, one of those charismatic experiences of, oh my God, this is real. And it scared me how real it was, because I was unprepared. I came for it as this sociological experiment. I'm going to try it. Oh, look, nothing happened. Well, that's great. If you want to be one of those simple-minded people with your simple piety, I'm not, I'll look down on you, but it's not for me kind of thing. But having this really moving experience of it, so moving, in fact, I put it away because I was like, uh-oh, this could be a gateway drug. I can't be doing this. But our brother bought some rosaries for my kids from Rugged Rosaries. Shout out to the people at Rugged Rosaries. And they were amazing. I was like, these things aesthetically just look awesome. I have to have one, if nothing else, just because my kids can't have one of these cool things and me not have one. So I got one for myself. And I had a stroke in 2019, a week after my 39th birthday. Nearly fatal. Could have died in the church.
Wow.
That's a whole other story. Rushed to the hospital, and I remember, I can't remember who it was, but I remember saying to whoever it was, tell my wife to bring the rosary, tell my wife to bring the rosary. And so she did. And my mind, of course, at that point is literally fried and scrambled. And I remember all I could do was say maybe a decade of the rosary because the repetition was there. And I had it wrapped around my bedside with the call button to the nurse. And I took a picture of that later because I thought it's such a profound image of I could call the nurse, but then I could also call on God with the intercession of Mary. And at that point, any objections I had theologically to interceding to Mary and to the saints was gone. Because I said, again, it's real. It's not real because I'm having some romanticized experience. It's real because I know it's real. Like, it's just in the depth of my being, I know this is real because this is literally all I have to hang on to. It's literally a life rope.
Yeah. You got me thinking about one that happened to me with Mary. I can't say per se Mary, but my wife and I went to the symphony in Kitchener. This is going to become about Mary's intercession, perhaps, which is not necessarily a bad thing. The wind section played O Magnum Mysterium. For those who have not, which is not the same in recording than it is in person. I have never cried for music before. I cried for that.
I remember that. I don't remember when the day it was, but I remember you sent to our group text, you guys have to listen to this song. You have to.
Yeah. Which I can't, but O Magnum Mysterium is just the Magnificat, is it not? Right? That's what it's. My soul magnifies the Lord. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. The Latin. It's my soul. It's just her Magnificat. Yeah. So anyway, if anyone sees an opportunity to go to the symphony and listen to that song, I highly recommend it.
Well, it's funny because my experience, I mean, touches both of yours. Because I think Adam, probably that lawyer you're talking about, was at this men's group that I went to, probably in Kitchener.
Probably, yeah.
Where I walk in, and I'm not yet a Catholic, and see like a dozen guys on their knees praying the rosary. And I thought, I don't know what this is. This seems wrong. As an evangelical, this seems like this shouldn't be a thing we're doing. But here are like these 12 guys from all walks of life, lawyers, detectives, accountants, plumbers, right? Teachers who are faithful in their Catholic faith, who love the Lord, who have families, and they brought also big chunky Bibles with them, but they're on their knees praying the rosary. And like, I think you guys both have said, like, that for me was one of those disarming encounters where I was like, you know what? I don't really know what this is all about just yet, but this can't be bad. What's happening here is so beautiful and so holy and so right.
Yeah. I don't think we can ever underestimate the evangelical power of faithful Catholics living out a faithful Catholic life. Because for me, it was a mythological creature growing up. Like, honestly, something that is from fairy tales and lives under bridges kind of thing. But it was actually through my time in university and meeting people in pastoral ministry that were faithful Catholics. I'm like, wait a minute, this kind of bucks the narrative.
Yes.
And it really challenges everything that we have been told to believe about these mythological creatures called Catholics. But it was living out simple Catholic piety and devotion that's like, wow, this is powerful. Like, the evangelical power of the small s saints, let alone the big S saints. I think that's one of the greatest. That's one of the greatest treasures that God has given to His church.
Big S saints, just for the iPod, the Apple podcast censors.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I was thinking, like, this is, I mean, so funny because my wife's side of the family comes from a tradition that left the CRC because they weren't evangelical and Bible loving enough, right? Which is also interesting. But I think just thinking of that, like I can think of so many Catholics growing up. Myself as a charismatically kind of gently salted evangelical, growing up, the Catholics who weren't good Catholics and who were the bad example of the Catholic, right? And then university, and the guy who kind of exposed me to Catholicism was a terrible Catholic. He was the guy who would go to the bars and drink and then come to class and try and present his presentation drunk, and right, not a good example of, but also brought me to my very first mass. So I mean, I love the guy, and I pray for him. I'm not sure where he is now, but I pray for him. But there are those bad examples we see of Catholics, and I think as evangelicals, as Protestant Christians, those are kind of magnified, right? They're made, like you said, Jason, kind of mythologized, right? Those are the bad Catholics. Yeah. There were, of course, plenty of examples of bad Protestants, right, in our churches, in our kind of orbits, that somehow are kind of just papered over or ignored or dismissed, right?
Yeah.
And somehow all those Catholics are worse.
Yeah. So, right? I remember being privy to so many different conversations about, why John Calvin was justified for how he treated Michael Servetus, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And I remember being taken aback, being like, wait a minute, are we going to essentially canonize Calvin to the point where we will defend everything he's done, even if it's morally and ethically questionable, if only to score points to say, but look what Catholics do. They say one thing and do another. Now, of course, that fits the narrative really well because, I didn't know about things like the magisterium and things like that and how they actually work. We were just told, well, the Pope can say it. And so if the Pope tells you the sky is purple, Catholics have to believe it. And, we're not superstitious like that. So we're just going to go around that. But then realizing, well, actually, just because a Catholic says that that's what they believe, that's not what all Catholics believe.
Yeah. No, and Keith, I have to echo that. Some of the most poignant critiques, which I can't disagree with about like the Catholics, is like the Catholics I see don't stay in the faith, and the Catholics from this faith, or not the Catholics, sorry, the Protestants from this faith, they stick around. So like, why would you want to become Catholic?
Yeah,
your kid, you're just your kids are gonna abandon the faith. It's like, I can't put a point to it. I hear the suggestion that it be catechesis after Second Vatican Council. It would not surprise me if that is a large contributing factor. And I don't know. It just says to me, okay, well, I guess I got to really make sure that my kids know. And
that brings us back to the point we made earlier. Like where we are now goes in large part to our parents and our grandparents who were very, very faithful, and not just in going through the motions, but like actually sacrificially in some cases made sure that we were brought up in the faith. Just a shout out to Matthew Levering. I'm reviewing the recent book of his, Why I'm Roman Catholic, and he actually goes into one of the chapters looking at his own struggles with Catholicism. And of course, that echoes a lot of the things that we've been talking about, kind of our own internal battles that don't look good to the outside world, that add fodder to people say, look see, they're just as bad as we are. And therefore, because they're just as bad, if not worse as we are, they're in the same kind of boat as we are. And also the reality of, people failing to live out their faith. But that's all of us. And so I think if we can be honest about our own struggles with living out the faith, the only fingers we need to be pointing are the ones at ourselves.
I'm curious, Jason, because you left something, not to say, Adam, yours wasn't as difficult.
Adam's is more by the book because Adam follows the script.
Yeah, he follows the script. You left a vocational ministry. You left the clergy. You left, a career, and that's no small potatoes. And I think too, there are, and I can't count the number of emails I've got over the last number of years of doing this, and number of guests who've been on the show who've been in your spot, who made that kind of crazy leap. It's terrifying. It's difficult. It's financially, emotionally. I mean, it's everything. It's you can't do much more.
And to make it even worse, it wasn't a voluntary choice.
Wow,
I
okay.
was terminated by my bishop without cause. He came into my office one day. The meeting lasted less than 5 minutes. He said, "You're done. No cause offered. In Ontario law, you can do that." And it was literally, one of the most, outside of my stroke, probably one of the most life-altering
Wow.
things in my life. And so, no intent on becoming Catholic, very resistant to the idea, other than to how far I'd already been up to this point as being a, self-professed Anglo-Catholic. I had nowhere to go, nowhere to turn. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have to remain faithful for my own sake and for the sake of my kids. And so I knew the parish pastor at our local Catholic parish, and it was Lent. And I made a commitment that during Lent I would go to daily mass as much as possible. And I think I did pretty well. But I just went and wrestled. And for the first month, there's a lot of anger, not directed toward not directed to God, but directed certainly to the people I felt responsible for my situation, anger at myself for like, how did I not see this coming? What am I going to do? How am I going to provide for my family? But then receiving the graces of just being there in that parish, present at Mass, not being able to participate, fully, but understanding the grace of what was happening with Christ's presence there. And then I remember it's at some point in that whole experience, just being like, okay, I have to lay down everything and just go with this. Because otherwise, I'm going to default to arguments. I'm going to default to combat. I'm going to default to fighting. I'm going to default to finger pointing and blaming. And none of that is going to be life giving to me or my family. And so I just have to trust God. And it's very, like when I was in the hospital recovering from my stroke and having people minister to me and being the one who's used to ministering to other people, I had to be a recipient of that grace in the context of that parish. And the parish pastor and the people were very gracious. They just kind of let me be. I'm sure they knew my story, which is to say, yeah, that's the former Anglican priest, and he is no longer there.
And by
But
the
they
way,
didn't.
these churches are very close together. You didn't mention that.
Yeah, they
point, but
literally they can see each other, right? Like they are, right down the road from each other. I had been preemptively outed, I think, by former parishioners who would see me going into Mass, and if that had happened a year ago, yeah, that would be scandal, right? Like, oh, what is he doing there, kind of thing. But just receiving the grace that was there and realizing, okay, setting aside my default for argumentation and wanting to be combative in that and learning to just receive grace was profoundly healing. And my kids actually approached me and they said, "Well, Dad, you're not Anglican anymore. We're not anymore either. Can we be Catholic?" I said, 100%. And so they were received on Easter Sunday by their own volition. They volunteered to do it. The three eldest went in. A joyful experience for them. But at that point, I still was like, I don't know. I mean, it's great for them. I want that for them. I don't know if I want it for me at this point. I mean, theoretically, yes, but existentially, I still wasn't there. And then when I got to that point of, okay, no, I can see the grace that's here. Yes. And like I said, Trinity Sunday, Father's Day, that was it. And I was like, okay, good. Now we move on. And so a lot happened in that short period of time. And, we're still working out a lot of that, but it's from a much better place, I think.
I'd like to call that termination your whale.
Yeah. I mean, looking back at these things, you always want to be able to say it's the best thing to happen to me. I'm not sure I'm there yet, but I can see how I will be in that position, hopefully sooner than later, that I can say, yeah, best thing that ever happened to me. Not because I regret the time that I was in ministry, right? It was very richly and personally rewarding. I got to be with people at some of the most joyous times in their life and at some of the most devastating times of their life. And for me, that was a real gift to be able to do that. And I hope I can continue to do that. And I can go back to my, that kind of, maybe not in the same mentality, but this idea that I don't have to be, quote unquote, a company man in that way, that I can minister to people where they're at, but drawing on that rich experience that I've had now. and not doing it as a kind of, rebellious spirit of, well, I'm not going to be directed in any way. Yeah. And shout out to any, Catholic pastors. I think for me, having experienced what our pastors go through, from an Anglican perspective, I've made the commitment. I am not going to be one of those people. I'm going to be as supportive to our pastors as possible. And if I have anything negative to say, I will say it to them directly and gently, and hopefully it never comes to that sort of thing. But because, and that comes again from my own experience of the grace that I received simply by being among faithful Catholics.
Yeah. I think your story, guys, I mean, I love this group chat, by the way, and I've heard about this for a long time. I think like 2020 when we first met, Adam, you mentioned this group chat that you and your brothers were in, I think, way back when, and it sounded fantastic. I love that idea. But it's such a, I mean, I can only think of one other, I had other brothers in the show before, two brothers who both made this kind of similar journey. I had a family band, the Wollivers, the whole traveling Christian family band converted kind of en masse, pun intended. But it's such a unique dynamic because so many times the dynamic is the family is kind of the hardest people to evangelize. Like the hardest sell are those who know you the best because they see you like warts and all, right? And they don't, well, like he became Catholic, but he also drinks too much, or he also like, swears on Sundays or something. Like they see those are weird examples. I don't know why either of those.
Those are the real world.
They see the unvarnished version of you, right? And it's the hardest to, and so many of us convert, and then nobody else gives a rip. Like nobody else, like, well, for a little bit, it's a thing. You talk about it for a bit, and it's a big deal, and then it kind of becomes just normative. Like, oh, they're the Catholics in the family, kind of thing, right? So it's fascinating that you guys have you brothers have been so close and so not in sync on this journey, but so willing to share and argue and make this kind of progress together and do this thing together. That's so fascinating.
Yeah. So what I'll say on that one, I remember when Caleb first was, crap, I did it again. I remember when my brother was first talking to me about some of the stuff he found. He was talking about, these podcasts I should go listen to, and I would ask him questions, but he would mostly ask questions back.
Yeah.
He mostly wouldn't look to provide answers. It's mostly like, but why? Like, but why? But like, why that? But like, why that? And I think that probably helped a lot. I mean, I can't say that for sure. There's going to be a certain amount of disposition, right? Like I said, when I started really looking, my life had been professionally turned upside down, which was a fair amount of uncertainty in that. Like there was a point in time where I almost left my employer, and I was like, I don't want to be part of this anymore. And what's going on? And I have I got a second kid coming, and what do I do with this? Right. And so I'm sure there's a certain amount of just the spirit and a certain disposition. But yeah, the question asking was key. Right.
And I think it's and this is to your credit, Keith, as well as the evangelical power of story.
Yes.
Right. If we look at the witness of the Gospels, especially St. Paul, right, what does he do time and again? He tells his story. So yes, coming from a tradition where we could argue doctrine, that's, there's something exciting about that, and there's something formative about that, but it's not as existentially satisfying as hearing a story and hearing the struggles of other people and be like, I can identify with that. That's not my story, but there's something real about that story that resonates with me. Mm-hmm. And I think what that does is it creates a sense of solidarity, like a real sense of the communion of saints coming together. And so in our individual and collective stories as brothers, we were able to do that and to push against each other and to receive what was going on, because we always knew that the bonds of family were very and still are very important in our extended family. And that having that foundation, I think, allowed us to be able to push and to pull and to receive and to give in a way that was really gratifying to each other, because we wanted to honor each other's stories as much as we would argue and push against them. But we're able to receive because of who we are and how we know each other and the relationships that are there. And so I think the power of, this podcast and others is allowing people to tell their stories so that other people can identify, oh, I'm not alone. Oh, that does sound familiar.
Yeah.
Yes, that story really pulls me in.
Yeah. That's very well said. I want one more thing for both of you guys, and then it's bedtime for all of us.
Yeah.
I think, but you mentioned before, Jason, the miracle of your family, extended family, being all kind of Christian still, and that heritage that allows you to build on that kind of foundation. I think that's really cool. My wife's family in Ohio, very strongly Christian, Mennonite tradition. Her grandparents, their lineage is Mennonite back to Switzerland. Like they were the first to leave Switzerland to come to America to avoid kind of the persecution amongst Protestants and Catholics back then. Like they can trace it back that far as some of the very first arrivals to the States. So they have a long Protestant tradition. And my wife and I became Catholic like 9 years ago for the both of us. And very little kind of conversation occasionally conversation amongst the cousins. And this past year being down there, one of the cousins said, all my friends are becoming Catholic. What's going on? And this is, a Mennonite evangelical kind of like, and we're like, oh, finally, it's catching up. Like, but we have that, like you said, that foundation, like those family bonds that have been built on for forever. That, okay, so she's seeing something different, and we're the people that she can come to talk to because, right, we have that relationship. And I think is fascinating. I think. Okay, that was an aside. My question for you guys, last thing here and this is going to be two different answers, I think, because you guys have two different perspectives. But remaining not Catholic, Adam, from the evangelical CRC, kind of like you saw the lady pastor, right? You saw the church kind of rumbling about who do we ordain, who can be in ministry. Like I saw a lot of that too in one church that I was in. Then it became sexuality and marriage, and we talked before about the idea of a pastor and people going to that church for that pastor, right? And I've seen churches split over those kind of questions of leadership and of these kind of things. And of course, in the Anglican church, it's the same thing's happening too. But I wonder from your perspective first, Adam, how do you, like the person who's remaining evangelical and seeing all that kind of tear apart, like you couldn't do that anymore. So for that person who's like, well, I'm trying to stay here, I'm trying to remain evangelical, this seems right, I'm seeing all this carnage, like, what would your suggestion be to that person who's there and sees the tension and is struggling to remain in that? Obviously, become Catholic is the answer.
Yeah.
But what's the first step, like, if they're curious about other options? Like, what would you say?
Yeah, I think it's that questions are okay because the truth is the answer, and we can't be afraid of the truth.
Yeah, that's good.
And it can be difficult. And I say this, so this is actually somewhat poignant, I'll be honest. The church that we used to go to did hit the second point you said, the sexuality point, after our leaving. It is, I'm not going to say exploding, but it is currently going through its own difficulties, such to the extent there's a group of friends of ours who I don't think at the end of the day, any of them will still be attending that church.
Yeah.
They've all gone elsewhere. I probably gone about it because I try to push a little bit, and my wife rightfully is like, don't, asking them questions about, Mary and why is it a problem and stuff like that. But at the same time, like, this is making me think about how I was upset with my brother, right? Our middle brother, being like, why are you doing this? And I'm upset with him, and being upset with him is not necessarily a bad thing, but also knowing, like, when someone has the ability to receive that too, right? But getting in the difficulty, I don't know. Sorry. I think a lot about how sometimes we're scared to get into something of an argument, but an argument in and of itself isn't bad if it's done cordially, to do that throw out. And again, if it's about questions, it's about questions, but you have to know, right? Like, someone might not be at a place for that, right? And so it's like, okay, we'll keep asking questions. And so my suspicion is keep asking questions. If you want to know anything, you want to hear anything, I'm there for that. Like, we can talk about it. Keep asking the questions, because something like that, a split or something like that, or that conflict can only happen when there are questions being asked. Because if there's no questions being asked, well, you just keep on doing your thing, right? Keep doing it, right? There's nothing to be disputed because we're just going to do what we're doing. So I don't know. Maybe that's not an answer. Maybe I danced around it and ended up nowhere, but.
Oh, that's great. Jason, similar to you, there are, I know there are Anglican priests who are listening to this podcast, watching this episode, who are trying their darndest to remain Anglo-Catholic, right? That kind of ethereal kind of term, right? That kind of covers all manner of sins and virtues. It's in my mind, somebody who watches these things becoming more and more difficult, even for the most devout and determined traditional kind of Anglican, right? In Canada, in North America, certainly around the world, that the what seemed like good places to park your flag, even those places in the Anglican Church are splitting apart. So I wonder, for that person who is where you were not too long ago, who is kind of terrified, and what your advice to them?
Yeah, it's a difficult position to be in. I suppose I have the grace that I got forced out.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I was not required then at that point. Now I had those kind of reflections personally and with very close friends and colleagues about what it means to remain and what it means to stay. And for me, I alluded to that image of St. John Henry Newman of the halfway house.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to remain until I can't remain. And what did it mean for me to say I couldn't remain? And oddly enough, not knowing what was going to happen to me in February this year, I said, being able to not remain is when that decision has been made for me. Now, that may be the easy way out in some ways because, well, at that point, I figured, well, there's no way I'm going to be fired. I'm a faithful priest. My parish seems to support my ministry on the whole. I realized, and I think anyone paying attention to what's happening in the Anglican tradition globally and in the Anglican Church here in Canada, it's not a good situation. I mean, it is a mess. And I don't say this as some embittered former Anglican priest. I voluntarily relinquished my holy orders. And so there's no bitterness in what I'm saying. Anyone who's paying attention knows it's a mess. Anyone who tries to say otherwise is clearly has some other sort of agenda or is just not able to pay attention. And I don't know that I have an answer to that. I empathize with it strongly because, like myself, there are good, faithful Anglican priests who are providing for their families. They're trying to hold their parishes together. They're trying to offer faithful ministry in an era of, for lack of a better term, diminishing returns. Knowing, of course, that as things get more fractured and frantic in the Anglican Church, you're going to be under increasing scrutiny. And as you get under increasing scrutiny and as things begin to severely contract, things get really, really, really bad. And I think, that was the grace that I was given, is that I don't have to live through that now anymore. But I would say to faithful Anglican priests is, do continue to do that reflecting. What does it mean for me to stay? What does it mean for me to go? And what would be the circumstances of my going? But anything more than that, it's really difficult to say. I mean, the easy answer is, well, become Catholic. And I say that glibly. I mean, for me, it was a vocational shift. Like I said, I'm a school chaplain at a Catholic secondary school. But after my termination, I thought, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, I have 5 years of graduate education. I've got nearly 2 decades of ministry experience, but that's in a Protestant setting. And I can't just go from being one kind of Protestant to another. I knew that at that point, that it was not a matter of being Anglican and then becoming Presbyterian or Congregationalist or something else. I mean, going back to Adam's story, it was like either I just I either commit to being Catholic or I just go to some sort of spiritual but not religious brand of agnosticism. I knew that was not really an option because of all the experiences I've had in my life. And so I think Anglican priests, ask those questions. And I know you're asking them already. Seek out the wisdom of other people who have been through that similar situation, right?
Keep seeking the truth.
That's
Yeah,
great.
keep seeking the truth. I think that's, we talk about family dynamics and relationships. And I think the thing that always brought us together was, and again, credit my parents, was always a matter of seeking the truth. And the truth is always identified in the person of Jesus. So as long as you're directed to that, then all the other stuff will work itself out along the way.
That's fantastic, guys. That's wonderful. Listen, I don't know if you guys have anything you want me to put in the show notes. Obviously, no recent books or but
I have a
get to work on
Substack
them.
where I talk a little bit about my journey, so people might be interested in that.
Absolutely. I'll put links to that in the show notes for sure.
Good.
I have snuck a peek at that. I think it's fantastic. So definitely recommend that. Adam, working on a book, your memoir, anything?
No,
in the
no, I just
It's all ones and zeros.
keep looking for. My shout out's gonna be to Catholic musicians. Keep looking
That's
for the
good.
Catholic musicians. Support them where you can. There's some pretty awesome Catholic music out there that I just say that because music is my background.
I don't know. I seem to recall, I can't remember his name, but there's a podcast that always is very supportive of a Catholic minister.
Oh yeah, that's
or
right. What is
Catholic
his
musician.
name? His name starts with an F. The second part of the artist's name starts with an R. I don't know. Keith, maybe you know this one?
Yeah, I think Keith might know him. I don't know. I think that's.
I've heard of him. Yeah, that's not bad. I'll put links to that in the show notes. Oh, they're already there. They're already there. Guys,
for sure.
Awesome. Guys, this has been a long time. I mean, yeah, a long journey for you guys, obviously an amazing journey, a long time coming for this conversation. So I'm very grateful for you guys for being here, and a long night too. So thanks for an awesome episode, guys, burning the almost midnight oil. Thanks guys. Honestly, I want to say to both of you guys, God bless you, your families, like the things you're involved with in the church, because I know both of you guys are involved in these things. They're awesome. Thanks for being here, guys. And this has been awesome. Thanks for
Pleasure. Keep up the good work.